All right, let's dive into one of the biggest, most mind-boggling puzzles in all of molecular biology. It's a question that gets to the very core of how life itself works. How in the world do proteins, these tiny machines that run our bodies, fold themselves into the perfect, complex shapes they need to do their jobs?
But here's where it goes from a puzzle to a flat-out paradox. See, scientists did the math. They calculated how long it would take for a single protein to just randomly try out every possible shape to find the right one. The answer? 10 to the power of 52 years. That's a 1 with 52 zeros after it. The universe is only about 14 billion years old. This number is just impossibly large. And yet, inside our bodies, this process happens in a fraction of a second. So what on earth is going on?
To even begin to get our heads around this, we need to take a step back and start with the basics. What exactly is a protein, and where does it even come from?
Okay, so just think of proteins as these microscopic workhorses. They're doing pretty much everything inside ourselves, carrying oxygen, digesting your lunch, fighting off viruses, you name it. And they're all built from these long, kind of floppy chains of molecules called amino acids. The thing is, a floppy chain can't really do anything. To get its job done, it has to fold up into a very specific, very stable 3D shape. If it folds correctly, it works. If it misfolds, well, that can lead to some really serious diseases.
So how does the cell build this chain in the first place? Well, it's not random. There's a super precise process, kind of like a biological assembly line, and it's running in your body trillions of times every single second.
It all starts with what's called the central dogma of molecular biology. First up, you've got your DNA. That's the master blueprint with all the instructions. Then, a copy of one specific gene is made into a little messenger molecule called RNA. That step is called transcription. That RNA message then floats over to a kind of cellular factory, which reads the instructions and starts stringing together amino acids in the right order. That's translation. And then finally, we get to the magic part. That new chain just, poof, folds itself into a perfect, functional protein.
But it was that last step, that folding that seems to happen in the blink of an eye, that really bothered a scientist named Cyrus Leventhal back in the 60s. He sat down, he did the math, and he realized something was very, very wrong. The numbers just didn't make any sense.
I mean, just try to wrap your head around this number again. For a typical protein, there are an astronomical number of ways it could fold. If it had to just randomly guess, trying one shape after another, it would take longer than the age of the known universe, by a lot. We're talking about a timescale that makes the Big Bang look like it happened yesterday. This isn't just a big number. It's a number that basically screams, this should be impossible.
And that right there is Leventhal's paradox. You have this massive, glaring contradiction. On one hand, the math says a random search should take forever. On the other hand, we can literally watch it happen in milliseconds. So clearly, whatever proteins are doing, it is not a random search. They're doing something way smarter. The question is, what?
This was the exact question that haunted biologists for decades. It's a huge clue. It tells us there have to be some kind of rules or guideposts, some specific pathways that the protein follows to avoid getting lost in that massive wilderness of wrong shapes. The search simply can't be random. Now here's the cool part. The key to solving this biological mystery? It wasn't found in a biology lab. Nope. The clue came from physics, from a fundamental law that governs how pretty much everything in the universe works, from beams of light to entire planets. It's called the principle of least action, and while it sounds really complex, the basic idea is surprisingly simple. Nature is efficient. It's kind of lazy, but in a really smart way. When a system goes from point A to point B, it will always take the path that costs the least amount of energy over time. The classic example is a lifeguard on a beach. To save someone in the water, they don't just run in a straight line. Why? Because it's way slower to run on sand than it is to swim. So they instinctively run a little ways down the beach first, then hit the water, minimizing the total time it takes to get there. That's the path of least action. And it turns out nature does this all the time.
Okay, so before we apply this idea to proteins, we need to get two terms straight because the difference is absolutely crucial. A pathway is the route, the actual sequence of folds the protein goes through. A trajectory, on the other hand, is just the time, how long it takes to go down that pathway. The path versus the time. Got it? This is the key that unlocks the whole thing.
All right, this is where it all clicks. When scientists took that principle of least action from physics and applied it to protein folding, they had a huge breakthrough. They realized the protein isn't searching randomly at all. It's being guided, forced along the most efficient folding pathways possible. So what does efficient even mean for a protein? Well, a protein always wants to end up in its most stable, lowest energy shape. But to get there, it has to get over a little hump first, an energy barrier. Think of it like having to push a boulder up a small hill before it can roll all the way down into a deep, stable valley. The size of that hill, that energy barrier you see labeled as delta G, is what determines how fast the folding happens. The smaller the hill, the faster you get into the valley.
And here's the game changer. It turns out there isn't just one single path to that final folded state. There can be lots of different routes, like all those lines you see here. But, and this is the whole thing, the principle of least action says nature doesn't waste time on the inefficient paths. It only follows the paths of least resistance, the ones with the smallest energy hill to climb. Here, those are the magenta lines. And because they all have the same small energy barrier, they all take the same amount of time. They all share one single, super fast, effective trajectory.
This is a great way to picture it. Think of it like a funnel or an energy landscape. The unfolded high-energy protein starts at the top rim. Instead of wandering all over the place for trillions of years, it's immediately guided down the steepest, most efficient valleys, all of which funnel it directly to that one lowest point at the bottom, the stable folded state. It's not a search, it's a guided fall.
And just like that, when you bring this perspective from physics into the picture, Levinthal's paradox, this puzzle that stumped scientists for decades, it just kind of dissolves.
Let's just walk through it one more time. The whole paradox was built on one bad assumption, that the search was random. It's not. The principle of least action dramatically limits the options. Nature forces the protein to only take the most efficient routes, and since all of those best routes have the same low energy barrier, they all happen in the same incredibly fast amount of time, that effective trajectory. The protein folds in milliseconds because, for nature, being inefficient just isn't an option.
And that leaves you with a really profound thought, doesn't it? Maybe the answers to some of life's most complicated mysteries aren't buried in mind-numbing complexity. Maybe the answer is actually found in a simple, beautiful, universal rule that nature will always find the most efficient way to get things done.